Those callous words, hurled across the crowded restaurant with enough force to carry to every corner, felt like a physical blow to Tiffany. But amidst the shared glances and uncomfortable shuffling, they ignited a spark in Colin, a single father just a few tables away, patiently explaining the Jurassic period to his dinosaur-obsessed son. What unfolded that Friday evening in the dimly lit Seattle bistro was not some grand, orchestrated act of heroism. It was a simple choice, a quiet rebellion against cruelty, destined to weave 3 lives together in ways no one could have predicted, proving that the most profound connections often blossom from moments of profound heartbreak. Before we delve into the unfolding drama, tell us, where in the world are you reading from? We are always amazed by the reach of these stories. The aroma of garlic bread and caramelized onions hung heavy in the air, a comforting contrast to the brewing tension. Colin Dawson watched his son, Levi, hunched over his menu, tongue peeking from the corner of his mouth in concentration, meticulously coloring a Tyrannosaurus Rex. "Dad, do you think dinosaurs had favorite foods?" Levi asked, his brow furrowed in scholarly inquiry, without lifting his gaze from his prehistoric masterpiece. Colin smiled, a wave of warmth washing over him, a familiar feeling he often experienced when dealing with his son. "I bet they did, buddy. Just like you and your refined palate for mac and cheese." Levi paused, considering. "It's not an obsession, Dad. It's a refined palate," he declared, the words carefully enunciated. Clearly a direct quote from his teacher, Miss Evans. Colin was about to retort with a playful jab when a flicker of movement near the entrance snagged his attention. A man, somewhere in his late 20s, exuded an air of calculated charm. Designer jacket, impeccably styled hair, and an expensive watch glinting under the soft lighting, the kind of man who probably assessed his reflection in every available surface. He was seated at a nearby table, his expression a mask of impatience, a subtle sneer playing on his lips. He curtly ordered a drink without so much as a glance at the waitress, his eyes constantly darting toward the entrance. Colin recognized that look or the unmistakable air of obligation, devoid of any genuine anticipation. 10 minutes ticked by, each marked by the man's increasingly agitated phone checks. Colin, dismissing the spectacle, refocused on Levi's elaborate plans for a volcano science project, complete with meticulously crafted miniature dinosaurs. Then the restaurant door swung open again, and a young woman in a sleek wheelchair wheeled herself inside. She handled the chair with an effortless grace, a testament to years of practice. She possessed a delicate beauty, a nervous smile playing on her lips. She was dressed with obvious care, a clear indication of the importance she placed on this evening. Colin watched as her eyes swept across the restaurant, finally locking onto the designer-jacketed man. Her face instantly illuminated, a radiant transformation. "Trevor? I'm Tiffany. It's so nice to finally..." But the words hung in the air, unfinished. Colin saw it happen in excruciating slow motion. The man's polite, waiting expression didn't just fade. It crumbled, collapsing under the weight of something far uglier. His smile vanished, as if someone had cut the strings holding it aloft, replaced by a look of undisguised disgust. His eyes raked over her face, then lingered on her wheelchair before returning to her face. His lip actually curled in disdain. "You've got to be kidding me." The words sliced through the convivial restaurant chatter, drawing gasps and shocked glances. Levi stopped coloring, his small hand suspended midair. Colin felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. "I'm sorry." Tiffany's voice was small, laced with confusion and hurt. Trevor, if that was indeed his real name, leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms defensively, as if she was a biohazard he needed to keep at bay. "Rachel didn't mention this," he said, gesturing dismissively at her wheelchair, making no attempt to lower his voice. "Look, I'm going to be straight with you because I don't believe in wasting time. This isn't going to work." "I don't understand," Tiffany stammered. But the truth was, she understood perfectly. Colin could see it in the way her hands tightened on the armrests, her knuckles turning white as bone. "I mean, come on. Trevor continued, his voice dripping with disdain. I'm an active guy. I run marathons. I go hiking every weekend. I need someone who's whole. Someone who can actually keep up with me. Someone normal. Colin watched as Tiffany visibly recoiled, as if she'd been struck. I'm not incomplete, she managed, her voice trembling but firm. I'm just. You're not enough. Trevor stood abruptly, extracted his wallet, and tossed 2 20s onto the table, the gesture reeking of contempt. I'm sorry, but I can't do this. I need a real partner, not a project. You understand, right? It's nothing personal. And with that, he turned and stalked out of the restaurant, leaving her stranded and exposed in front of a room full of strangers. The silence that followed was deafening, thick with discomfort and unspoken judgment. Colin saw other diners avert their gazes, feigning absorption in their menus. Some whispered furtively behind cupped hands. A few stared with a pity that felt almost as corrosive as Trevor's cruelty. Tiffany sat frozen, her face flushed a deep crimson, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She was visibly fighting to maintain her composure. Dad? Levi's voice was small, laced with distress. Why did that man say those mean things? The lady didn't do anything wrong. Something ignited in Colin's chest, a fierce protectiveness that had been dormant for too long. For 6 years, he'd worked at Harborview Rehabilitation Center, witnessing firsthand the struggles of people rebuilding their lives after devastating accidents and injuries. He'd held the hands of patients who'd wept about being rejected, about being told they were less than, about being defined by their limitations instead of their inherent worth. He'd watched them claw their way back to living, to reclaiming their belief that they deserved to occupy space in the world. And this woman, this complete stranger, had just been publicly stripped of her basic human dignity. Not on his watch. Colin made a decision, a seemingly small act of defiance that would ripple through all their lives. Levi, how would you feel about making a new friend tonight? His son's face instantly brightened. Really? Can we help her, Dad? Yes, buddy. We can. Colin stood up, his heart pounding a steady rhythm of determination. As he walked toward Tiffany's table, he thought about the countless patients he'd worked with. The veteran who'd lost his legs in Afghanistan and learned to run again on prosthetics. The teenager paralyzed in a car accident who'd gone on to compete in wheelchair basketball. The grandmother who'd suffered a stroke and fought through a year of grueling therapy to hold her grandchildren again. They were some of the most resilient, inspiring individuals he'd ever encountered. And this woman, sitting alone, battling to hold herself together in the face of such public humiliation, possessed that same inner strength. She just needed someone to see it, to acknowledge it. Excuse me. She didn't look up, her gaze fixed on her lap, her shoulders trembling slightly. Excuse me, Colin repeated gently. I'm Collins. That's my son Levi over there. He paused, waiting until she slowly lifted her eyes to meet his. They were a startling shade of blue, brimming with unshed tears, filled with humiliation and a profound sense of hurt. We couldn't help but overhear what just happened, and we want you to know that Guy was completely wrong. You're not incomplete. You're not a project, and you deserve so much better than that. Tiffany stared at him, her expression a mixture of disbelief and cautious hope, as if she couldn't quite grasp that this was actually happening. We were wondering, Colin continued, crouching down so they were at eye level, if you'd like to join us for dinner. Levi's 7 and he talks nonstop about dinosaurs, so I apologize in advance, but we'd really enjoy the company. For a long, suspended moment, she simply looked at him, her gaze searching, probing. Colin could see her silently assessing him, trying to discern if this was mere pity, if this was genuine, if she could dare to trust this unexpected act of kindness. You don't have to do that, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I know I don't have to. Colin held her gaze, unwavering. I want to. That man was wrong about everything he said. You're complete exactly as you are, and you shouldn't have to sit here alone after what he put you through. He gestured toward their booth, where Levi was half standing, waving enthusiastically with both hands. Besides, Colin added with a gentle smile, Levi's already decided you're his friend, and he's very persistent about these things. A single tear escaped, tracing a glistening path down Tiffany's cheek. But then, she smiled, tentative and fragile, but undeniably real, and it transformed her entire face. "Okay," she said quietly. "Thank you. Thank you so much." As Colin walked beside her chair back to their booth, he was acutely aware of the other diners watching. But this time, their expressions had shifted. The elderly couple at the next table nodded approvingly. Their waitress, Dorothy, a fixture at the restaurant for years, gave Tiffany's shoulder a gentle squeeze as she passed. Colin wasn't performing for their approval. He was acting on his deeply held belief that it was the right thing to do, fueled by a desire to instill in Levi that kindness wasn't a complicated equation. It was a conscious choice, a commitment you made every single day, especially when confronted with someone else's cruelty. "Hi, I'm Levi." His son's greeting was immediate and unrestrained. "I'm 7 3/4, which is almost 8. That man was really mean to you, and I'm sorry. My dad says some people don't know how to see what's really important." He paused for dramatic effect, then posed the most crucial question. "Do you like dinosaurs?" Tiffany let out a surprised laugh, genuine and unexpected. The sound seemed to release some of the pent-up tension that had been constricting her shoulders. She quickly wiped at her eyes. "I'm Tiffany. I'm 25 and thank you, Levi. That's very sweet of you to say. And to answer your very important question, I do like dinosaurs, actually. What's your favorite?" "Ankylosaurus." Levi launched into an enthusiastic explanation. "Because it has armor and a club tail, so it could protect itself from T-Rexes and other predators." "What's yours?" Colin watched as Tiffany visibly relaxed, Levi's innocent enthusiasm creating a safe haven where the humiliation of moments ago could begin to dissipate. "I think I'd have to say the pteranodon," she said thoughtfully. "Because flying seems pretty amazing. Imagine being able to just soar away whenever you wanted." Pteranodons aren't actually dinosaurs. They're pterosaurs, but they're still really cool. "And you're right, flying would be awesome." "Levi," Colin interjected with a gentle warning, "let's give Tiffany a chance to catch her breath." "Okay. It's okay," Tiffany said softly, meeting Colin's eyes. "Really, this is nice. Thank you." The sincerity in her voice resonated deeply, causing Colin's chest to tighten with a mix of emotions. Dorothy reappeared at the table. "What can I get for you, sweetie?" she asked Tiffany, her voice laced with particular warmth, pointedly ignoring the empty table where Trevor had been. As they placed their orders, mac and cheese for Levi, grilled salmon for Tiffany, a burger for Colin, the conversation began to flow more naturally. Tiffany inquired about Levi's school, prompting him to launch into an animated explanation of his volcano science project. And then the baking soda and vinegar make it explode. He demonstrated with wild hand gestures, nearly knocking over his water glass. "Dad helped me build it out of clay, but I did all the painting myself." "That sounds incredible," Tiffany said, her voice genuinely interested. "I'd love to see pictures." Colin retrieved his phone, displaying the photos. As she scrolled through them, offering sincere compliments about Levi's artistic choices, Colin found himself studying her. He noticed the quiet strength etched around her eyes, a determination that Trevor's cruelty hadn't managed to extinguish. She'd been knocked down, brutally so, but she was actively choosing to rise again. "So, Collins," Tiffany said, handing back his phone, "what do you do?" "I'm a physical therapist at Harborview Rehabilitation Center. I work mostly with patients recovering from accidents and injuries, helping them regain mobility and independence." Something flickered in Tiffany's expression, recognition, perhaps, or a deeper understanding. "That must be rewarding work." "It is," Colin said honestly. "Every day I see people pushing through pain and frustration to reclaim their lives. They're some of the strongest people I've ever met." The subtle emphasis on strongest wasn't lost on Tiffany. She glanced down at her hands, then back up at him. "I had physical therapists after my accident. They saved my life in a lot of ways, not just physically, but they helped me believe I could still have a life worth living." What happened? Levi asked with the unvarnished curiosity of childhood. Why do you have a wheelchair, Levi? Colin started to intervene, but Tiffany shook her head gently. It's okay. I don't mind. She turned to Levi, her expression open and honest. I was a swimmer in college, a really serious one. I was training to try out for the Olympics. One day during practice, I was diving and I hit my head on the bottom of the pool. It damaged my spine, and now my legs don't work the way they used to. Colin felt a surge of admiration. She was explaining something incredibly personal to a 7-year-old with such grace and candor. Does it hurt? Levi asked, his young face etched with concern. Sometimes, Tiffany admitted, but I've learned to live with it. I can do most of the things I could do before, just differently. I work as a graphic designer now, creating logos and websites for businesses. Paint. I still swim with my arms at the Adaptive Sports Center. Life looks different than I planned, but it's still mine. That's really cool, Levi said, his eyes wide with genuine respect. Seriously, you're like a superhero who adapted to new powers. Tiffany blinked, momentarily taken aback. Then she smiled, a truly genuine smile that radiated warmth and transformed her entire face. You know what? I like that way of thinking about it. Thank you, Levi. As their food arrived and they ate, the conversation continued to flow. Tiffany shared stories about growing up with 3 older brothers who'd instilled in her a sense of toughness and competitiveness. They never let me win at anything just because I was the youngest or the only girl. I had to earn every victory. After my accident, they were amazing. They built ramps at our parents' house before I even got home from the hospital. But they also didn't let me wallow. They expected me to keep fighting. Do they live nearby? Colin asked. 2 are in Portland. 1's in San Francisco. We video chat every Sunday, though. They're very protective, she added with a laugh. If they knew about tonight, they'd probably hunt Trevor down. I'd help. The words slipped out before he could censor himself, earning him another genuine smile. When Levi started yawning into his mac and cheese around 8:30, Colin knew it was time to bring the evening to a close. But as he signaled for the check, he found himself reluctant to let the night end. There was something undeniably compelling about Tiffany. Her resilience, her vulnerability, her dry wit, the effortless way she connected with Levi, that drew him in. If you've ever encountered someone and felt an inexplicable, instant connection, you understand how rare and precious that feeling is. Colin had experienced it only once before with his ex-wife, and that had culminated in a note on the kitchen counter and a 2-year-old who'd spent the next 6 months asking for his mommy. But this felt different, more grounded, more real than that initial spark had ever been. Tiffany, he said, attempting to sound casual but failing miserably. I know tonight didn't exactly go as planned, but would you maybe want to do this again properly? I mean, not as some kind of rescue mission, but as... He hesitated, then opted for honesty. As a date, a real one with me. Tiffany scrutinized him for a long, silent moment. Colin could practically see the internal debate raging behind her eyes. She was undoubtedly questioning his motives, wondering if this was driven by pity or some misplaced sense of obligation. Why? She asked finally, her voice soft but direct. Is this because you feel sorry for me? No. Colin leaned forward, holding her gaze with unwavering intensity. It's because, in the last 2 hours, I've watched you handle one of the most humiliating situations I can imagine with grace and dignity. Because you made my son laugh and took his dinosaur obsession seriously. Because you're clearly intelligent, funny, and incredibly interesting. And because when you smile, really smile, it's like the whole room gets brighter. He paused, then spoke the words that truly mattered. Trevor was wrong about everything. You're not incomplete. If anything, I think you might be one of the most complete people I've ever met. Tiffany's eyes welled up with tears again. But these were different tears. Not tears of humiliation, but something else entirely, hope, perhaps, or a burgeoning sense of possibility. I'd like that, she said, her voice barely audible. I'd really like that, Collins. They exchanged phone numbers. As Colin gently lifted a drowsy Levi into his arms, his son mumbled against his shoulder. I really like her, Dad. She's nice, and she knows that pterosaurs aren't dinosaurs. I like her too, buddy, he whispered back, a warmth spreading through his chest. As they walked toward their car, Colin glanced back through the restaurant window. Tiffany was still seated at the table, gazing at her phone, likely at their newly exchanged numbers, with a small, genuine smile gracing her face. He was certain he'd made the right decision that night. 3 days later, Colin found himself on the phone with Tiffany on a Monday evening after Levi was sound asleep. He'd texted her the next morning, unable to endure the agonizing wait any longer, and they'd been exchanging messages and calls ever since. So, honest question, Tiffany said, her voice carrying a hint of vulnerability. Why are you single? You're a great dad. You have a good job. You're kind, which apparently is rarer than it should be. What's the story? Colin had anticipated this question. He took a deep breath, bracing himself. Levi's mom left when he was 2. We'd been married for 3 years, and I honestly thought we were happy. But she wasn't. She wanted to pursue modeling in Europe. She felt like being a wife and mother was holding her back. One day, I came home from work and found a note on the kitchen counter. She was already on a plane. Oh, Collins, that's awful. It was, he admitted. For a long time I was angry not just for me, but for Levi. How do you just walk away from your child? But eventually, I realized that anger was just consuming me. She made her choice and Levi and I made ours. We built a good life, just the 2 of us. He's an amazing kid. You've done an incredible job. Thanks, though I can't take all the credit. He came out pretty amazing on his own. Colin paused, then asked the question that had been lingering in his thoughts. What about you? Have you dated much since your accident? Tiffany laughed, but the sound was tinged with bitterness. Friday night was actually my first blind date in over a year. I tried a few times before, but it always played out the same way. Guys who seemed interested online would suddenly develop emergencies when they saw the wheelchair, or they'd go through with the date but treat me like some kind of charity case. Trevor was just the most brutally honest about his disgust. That says everything about them and absolutely nothing about you, Colin said firmly, his voice laced with conviction. Maybe, but it's hard not to internalize it after a while. You start to wonder if maybe they're right. If maybe you're asking too much to want someone to love you as you are. You're not asking too much. Colin's voice was steady, resolute. You're asking for the bare minimum, to be seen and valued as a complete person. Anyone who can't do that doesn't deserve you. There was a prolonged silence on the other end of the line. You barely know me, Collins. How can you be so sure? Because I spend every day working with people who've been through what you've been through. I've witnessed the incredible strength it takes to rebuild your life after everything changes in an instant. I've held the hands of patients who've wept about being rejected by people who claim to love them. And I've watched those same patients go on to live full, rich, meaningful lives. He meant every word with every fiber of his being. You're not defined by your wheelchair, Tiffany. You're defined by who you are. And from what I've seen, that's someone pretty remarkable. He could hear her soft, measured breathing on the other end of the line. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. Thank you. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that. Their second date, a visit to the Seattle Art Museum, set the tone for everything that followed. Levi had insisted on accompanying them. He declared Tiffany his friend, and as Colin had already learned, Levi was fiercely resolute about these things. The 3 of them spent the afternoon wandering through the galleries, Levi providing running commentary on every sculpture, inventing elaborate backstories that had both adults in stitches. When they reached a massive abstract piece constructed from twisted metal, Levi confidently declared it a dinosaur performing yoga. Tiffany had laughed so heartily she'd nearly lost her balance in her chair. Colin had instinctively reached out, his hands steadying her shoulders. Their eyes had met, lingering for a moment longer than strictly necessary, a silent acknowledgement of something unspoken between them. Their third date was dinner at a cozy Italian restaurant, after Levi's bedtime. Colin's neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, had readily agreed to watch Levi for the evening. Without Levi serving as their delightful buffer, The conversation delved into deeper, more intimate territory. They spoke about loneliness, about fear, about the ongoing, arduous process of rebuilding oneself when life unexpectedly crumbles. The worst part isn't the physical limitations, Tiffany confided. It's the way people perceive you, or more accurately, don't see you. I've become invisible in some ways. Men look through me now, not at me. I'm either a tragedy or inspiration porn, never just a woman. I see you, Tiffany, Colin said softly, reaching across the table to gently take her hand. Just you, a beautiful, intelligent, funny woman who I can't seem to stop thinking about. That night, in the dimly lit parking lot, he kissed her for the first time. The presence of her chair between them initially made the angle awkward, until they both burst out laughing, and he knelt down to her level, cupping her face tenderly in his hands. Is this okay? He murmured. More than okay, she whispered, her voice catching in her throat. Over the ensuing months, they nurtured something real, something solid and enduring. Tiffany became a constant, cherished presence in their lives. She attended Levi's soccer games, adapted soccer, which she'd actually helped Colin discover. She assisted with homework, particularly art projects, where her graphic design skills proved invaluable. She even taught Colin how to cook edible meals. How did you even survive this long? She teased one evening, rescuing a burning pan from certain disaster. Takeout. Lots and lots of takeout. Colin immersed himself in her world. 2. He accompanied her to the Adaptive Sports Center, watching her swim with powerful, graceful arm strokes, her face radiant with pure joy in the water. He learned to navigate the city with wheelchair accessibility in mind, noticing for the first time the countless barriers that existed, often overlooked by those who didn't need to navigate them. That restaurant has 3 steps at the entrance, Tiffany would point out. I'll have to use the back entrance through the alley. That's ridiculous, Colin had retorted, his brow furrowed in frustration. Why wouldn't they have a ramp? Welcome to my world. The following week, Colin drafted letters to 10 local businesses, advocating for greater accessibility. He couldn't solve every problem overnight, but he could certainly take action. There were undoubtedly hard moments. Nights when Tiffany's phantom pains were so intense she couldn't sleep, and Colin held her close while she wept. Days when thoughtless strangers made insensitive comments or stared with unashamed curiosity. Moments when Levi asked innocent but pointed questions about why Tiffany couldn't do certain things. But those challenging moments were vastly outweighed by the abundance of joy and connection. Sunday mornings when Tiffany would arrive early to make pancakes while Levi meticulously set the table. Movie nights when they'd all pile onto the couch, playfully debating whether dinosaurs or sharks were inherently cooler. Quiet evenings after Levi was asleep when Colin and Tiffany would simply talk, sharing their dreams, their fears, and the intimate details of their respective days. I love you, Colin blurted out on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday evening in March. For months after that pivotal first dinner, they were washing dishes together, Levi already tucked into bed, and the words simply tumbled out, unbidden and undeniable. I love you, Tiffany. I think I have since that first night, when you sat down at our table and patiently let Levi lecture you about pterosaurs instead of allowing that awful man to ruin your evening. Tiffany froze, her hands still submerged in the sudsy water. Then, slowly, deliberately, she turned to face him, her eyes glistening with a mix of surprise and profound emotion. I love you, too, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Both of you. You made me believe again that I could be loved. Really loved. Exactly as I am. Not despite my wheelchair, not because of some misplaced fetish or savior complex, but just as me. Always as you, Colin affirmed, stepping forward to kiss her softly. Every single part of you. The following morning, over breakfast, Levi looked up from his bowl of cereal and posed a life-altering question. Is Tiffany going to be my mom? Colin nearly choked on his coffee. Buddy, that's a big question. I hope so, Levi said simply, his brow furrowed with childlike earnestness. I like her, and she likes us. Doesn't that make us a family? Colin and Tiffany exchanged a meaningful glance. They had been dancing around the inevitable for weeks, ever since that fateful dinner at the Copper Kettle almost a year prior. Colin's, ring tucked securely in his pocket, was holding out for the perfect moment. Levi, bless his heart, was a whirlwind of barely contained anticipation. "Is today the day?" he'd whisper dramatically each morning, his eyes wide with excitement. "Are you going to ask her today, Dad?" Collins would just chuckle and ruffle his hair. "Patience, buddy. The right moment will come." Finally, inspiration struck. Collins decided to drive them to Discovery Park, Tiffany's sanctuary within the city. With its accessible, winding trails and breathtaking panoramic views of Puget Sound, it was the perfect place to create a memory. And the day itself, it was the kind of flawless spring day that Seattle rarely, if ever, delivered. The sun poured down warmth, painting the sky in brilliant blues, and the sound glittered like a scattered treasure of diamonds. They strolled along the path, eventually reaching their favorite spot, a secluded clearing that overlooked the shimmering water. Levi, predictably, was immediately off, drawn by the mysteries of a nearby tidal pool, leaving Collins and Tiffany alone in the tranquil space. "This is nice," Tiffany murmured, tilting her face towards the sun as if to absorb every last ray. "I love it here." Collins took a deep breath, his heart suddenly hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He knelt down beside her chair, gently taking her hand in his. "Tiffany," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "A year ago, I sat by and watched a man try to diminish your worth, tell you that you weren't enough, that you were somehow incomplete, and I've spent every single day since then wanting to prove him so unbelievably wrong." Tiffany's breath hitched in her throat. Understanding dawned in her eyes, widening them with a mixture of surprise and burgeoning hope. "You're not incomplete, Tiffany. You are extraordinary. You are strong, and fiercely funny, and brilliantly talented, and so incredibly kind. You've made Levi's life immeasurably richer just by being in it. You've certainly made my life richer. You've shown us both what real, unconditional love looks like, patient, accepting, genuine. Every single day, I wake up grateful that I was in that restaurant that night. Grateful that fate led me to you, to both of you." "Collins," Tiffany whispered, tears already tracing glistening paths down her cheeks. He tightened his hold on her hand, his voice unwavering. "I don't want to spend another day, another moment, without you being officially, irrevocably, a part of our family." He reached into his pocket, his fingers trembling slightly as he retrieved the small velvet box. He opened it, revealing a simple, elegant ring, a single, brilliant cut diamond catching the sunlight. "Tiffany Williams, will you marry me?" "Yes," Tiffany cried, not even a fraction of a second of hesitation. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Collins carefully slipped the ring onto her finger, and then she was pulling him up, her arms encircling his neck, showering him with kisses while they both laughed and sobbed, a joyous, tangled mess. "Did she say yes?" Levi's voice boomed from the direction of the tidal pool. "Can I come back now?" "She said yes," Collins shouted back, his voice full of elation. Levi came sprinting, whooping with unadulterated joy, and launched himself at both of them with such enthusiastic force that he nearly sent Tiffany's chair tumbling backward. Collins, thankfully, managed to steady them all, wrapping his arms around both his future wife and his son. They stayed like that for a long, precious moment, a tangle of arms, laughter, tears, and pure, unadulterated joy. "We're a family now," Levi declared, his voice filled with pride. "A real family. We always were, buddy," Tiffany said softly, leaning down to kiss the top of his head. "We always were." They were married that summer, in a small, intimate ceremony held by the water at Golden Gardens Park. Tiffany, radiant in a simple white dress, wore a crown of wildflowers woven into her long, flowing blonde hair. Collins couldn't tear his gaze away from her as she wheeled down the aisle, her 3 brothers walking proudly beside her chair. Levi, entrusted with the enormous responsibility of ring bearer, took his job with the utmost seriousness. Although he did pause halfway down the aisle to proudly display his favorite dinosaur action figure to one of the guests. Collins's colleagues from the rehabilitation center were there, including several former patients who had become dear friends. Mrs. Patterson, ever the sentimental soul, sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a lace-edged handkerchief. When the officiant reached the part of the ceremony where objections were voiced, Levi piped up, his voice ringing with impatience. "I object to waiting any longer. Can they kiss already?" The entire gathering erupted in laughter. "I love you," Collins whispered, his voice thick with emotion, as they were pronounced husband and wife. "My complete, perfect, extraordinary wife." "I love you, too," Tiffany whispered back, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Thank you. Thank you for seeing me. Really seeing me. Always," he promised. Later, during their first dance as a married couple, Collins held Tiffany's hands as she skillfully maneuvered her chair in slow, graceful circles. "I never thought I'd have this," Tiffany confessed quietly, her voice laced with awe. "After my accident, I thought this kind of love was closed off to me. That night at the restaurant when Trevor said those things, I almost didn't go out with you because I was afraid you were just being nice, just pitying me. And now?" Collins asked gently, his eyes searching hers. "And now, I know better," she said, smiling. "You loved me from the start. Not my wheelchair, not my story, but me, the woman I am. And you gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever. The belief that I deserve to be loved completely." "You do," Collins said firmly, his voice ringing with conviction. "You deserve everything good in this world." As the evening drew to a close, Collins stood to give a toast. "A year ago, I was in a restaurant with my son when we witnessed an act of senseless cruelty. A man told the woman who is now my wife that she wasn't enough, that she was incomplete, that she wasn't worthy of his time." He paused, letting his gaze settle on Tiffany, his eyes filled with love and admiration. "He was wrong about everything. Tiffany has shown me and Levi what it truly means to be whole. Not because of what you can or can't do physically, but because of who you are in your heart. She's made us better people just by being a part of our lives." He raised his glass high. "To my wife, who is complete, who is enough, who is everything. Thank you for choosing us. Thank you for making us whole." "To Tiffany!" the room chorused, their voices filled with warmth and affection. 2 years after that fateful Friday night at the Copper Kettle, the Dawson family had settled into a beautiful rhythm. They'd moved into a new house, one Collins and Tiffany had chosen together, designed with accessibility features integrated from the very beginning. Wide doorways, a roll-in shower, lowered countertops in Tiffany's home office, where she ran her thriving graphic design business. Levi, now 9 years old, had started a club at school called Ability Awareness, where he educated his classmates about disabilities and the importance of accessibility. Because everyone deserves to be included, he'd explained to his teacher, his voice full of earnest conviction. Collins continued his work at the rehabilitation center, his dedication unwavering. Tiffany often accompanied him to the center, where she would talk to newly injured patients about navigating life after disability. "I won't lie to you," she'd tell them, her voice honest and compassionate. "Some days will be hard. Some people will be cruel or thoughtless. You'll grieve the life you planned, but you'll also discover strength you didn't know you had. You'll learn who truly matters in your life. And if you're lucky, if you're as incredibly lucky as I was, you'll find people who see you, really see you, and love every part of who you are." On a Saturday morning in late spring, Collins woke to find Levi and Tiffany already in the kitchen, bathed in the soft glow of the morning sun. Tiffany was in her chair at the stove, patiently teaching Levi how to flip pancakes, while he stood on his step stool beside her, his brow furrowed in concentration. "No, like this," Tiffany was saying, demonstrating the delicate flick of the wrist. "See? It's all in the technique." Levi tried, with predictably disastrous results. The pancake landed half on the pan, half on the counter in a sticky, eggy mess. They both dissolved into a fit of giggles. Collins leaned against the doorframe, watching his family, and felt a wave of gratitude so profound it almost brought tears to his eyes. This chaotic, loving, imperfect, beautiful life was everything he had ever wanted. "Dad!" Levi spotted him, his face smeared with batter. "Come help. Tiffany's teaching me to make dinosaur-shaped pancakes." "Those look more like blobs," Collins teased gently, walking over to kiss his wife good morning. "They're abstract dinosaurs," Tiffany defended, grinning up at him. "Very modern, very artistic." As they ate breakfast together, the slightly burnt, very abstract dinosaur pancakes, Collins thought back to that Friday night at the Copper Kettle. One moment, one choice. It had changed everything. They were a family. They were complete. They were home. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, please don't let it end here. Let it remind you that kindness still matters, compassion still changes lives, and hope is never wasted. Subscribe and be part of our Soul Lift Stories family, where every story lifts the spirit and reminds us that light always finds its way back. And if this moment moved you, share it.